Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar. You're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression, because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash.
Yeah. Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
And welcome everybody to the Libertarian Podcast Review. It's Tyler Yonke. I think we're episode 80. And John Odermatt, one of the OGs in the Libertarian podcast world, or just maybe it's the podcast world. Welcome, John. I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, Tyler, great to be here, man. And I got to tell you, your introduction is one of the best, dude. And have you seen the documentary about the smash Kai?
Kai, I have.
Yeah.
Yes. So
it's fantastic.
It is, and I take it just from your question that you've seen it as well. Then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I live in Northern California, up by Sacramento, and so when he first did his thing, it was out here in Stockton. So it was semi-local news, and one of the radio shows I listened to in the morning, they were all over it. And so just by all of that, I've known about Kai, right? And that smash. I mean, I took that in, and then yes, I watched the thing. Sad story. I mean, it's obvious that guy had some mental problems though from day one.
For sure. I mean, yeah, it took a shocking twist there at the end, but I mean, yeah, who knows what happened? I mean, really, with that whole situation, it seems like he kind of probably should have been talking to a lawyer when he was just really telling.
Yes.
Exactly what went down to the police, but
great segue. You're doing it all here. So you do a lot of stuff with. And I will get into your show, but as an attorney myself, so I just want to renounce this. Andy and I are going to be doing a book review. It's called The Respondent. I don't know if you've heard of Greg Ellis. His whole thing with Family Court in California. He was an actor. He was a friend of Johnny Depp. We're going to go through it. So tune into that on Friday, because me as an attorney and a little bit autistic, I couldn't help but read this and go, something's missed. And I went and found his court documents. So it'll be a fun one. Okay, back up, but I do want to get into it because you do a lot of like legal analysis stuff on your show. You're Finding Freedom. That's the right name, right? I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, that's the right name.
Okay,
yeah, you got it.
So, but before we even get there, John, tell us, how did you start this podcasting thing? People know you're Lions of Liberty, but how specifically did you get going into the podcast? And I also want to know how you met Brian and Mark. Like, not like, oh, I met him at college, but like when you first saw him and some of that connection. So throw that out at us.
Yeah. I don't know how much people know the story, but yeah, Brian, Mark, and I, we were all in the same fraternity at Penn State. So Brian and Mark are, I think, 3 years older than me. So when I pledged the fraternity, they were like, these older guys in the house. So like, my first like friendship with them was from like almost like a big brother type standpoint, if that makes sense. And I like to put this out there too, like our fraternity, we didn't do any gay stuff, any weird stuff like that. It was just doing push-ups and making fun of each other. Like most people on the East Coast do, we like to make fun of each other. So our friendship is largely built around that. If you've listened to many of our libertarians in living rooms drinking liquor stuff, there's a lot of banter back and forth. But like how Lions of Liberty as a podcast started, that really started around Ron Paul. So back in 2007, when he first like announced his bid to run for the Republican nomination way back then, Mark and our buddy Howie already knew about him. I hadn't heard of him. And it just so happened around that time, I moved out to California. Brian and Mark were living out there. I got a job after college. Then my job transferred me out to California. So I was hanging out with Mark and Brian, and I'm with Mark at a dive bar somewhere. in it was some like the middle of nowhere. It wasn't like in LA. I forget why we were even there. We were out in like the well, I lived in the Inland Empire, but we weren't even we were like in the middle of nowhere. I think Mark was like trying to talk to a bartender or something. Hey. Anyway, so we're in this bar, and he starts talking about Ron Paul, this Republican who's anti-war, and he's talking about the Federal Reserve. And I was kind of blown away because I always thought Mark was like a raging leftist. I was sort of on the neoconservative side of things. I used to get in like heated arguments in college about, George W. Bush and how great he was and how, he was spreading democracy in the Middle East and all this stuff.
What year did you graduate college?
2006.
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
so yeah,
prime Bush area.
Yeah, prime Bush time. Yeah, and I was into it for a while, and then it's not like Mark changed my mind upon mentioning the name Ron Paul and flipped a switch or anything, but that kind of just like set me down the YouTube rabbit hole of like looking at Ron Paul's speeches and reading some of his books, and it was just like really built from. My path to libertarianism was really built from the Federal Reserve aspect of it. Like once I understood that the whole monetary system was a farce, then I went and looked at foreign policy. I'm like, wow, this is all tied to the monetary system. And it just kind of exploded from there. And the way Lions of Liberty started, that was around 2012 timeframe when Ron Paul did his second campaign. We had like started like an email chain back in the day when people had email chains, Facebook and forums and all this stuff. We would just send articles to each other and talk about them and put out these like long discussions back and forth. And after a while, we're like, why don't we start one of those blogs and we'll just talk about this stuff there. So we just started a blog, called it Lions of Liberty because we like liberty. Went to Penn State, Lions of Liberty, Penn State Nittany Lions.
Yeah.
And that's really how it started. We started just a blog on like I think it was called Blogger. Is that what Google had back in the day?
Yes.
Then eventually moved it to WordPress, and just kind of went from there. And then from like for my show, what I got into, I had someone close to me in our family, actually in my wife's family, that was in college and got tied up in a undercover sting operation, really, for selling marijuana. And he had this undercover cop that came to him multiple times buy increasing quantities of pot to get to the point that they could, charge a felony and all this stuff. They did a raid. It was a whole terrible thing. He ended up going to jail for about a year, was in halfway house for a while. Has a felony on his record, and that whole situation kind of set me down the path with criminal justice reform, and that's when I started Felony Friday. And Felony Friday just really started out just looking at a lot of these crazy things that were happening, writing about them first, and then once Mark started a podcast, he would bring me on, every so often to talk about some of these stories. And so we split off and we didn't split off at that point. Mark had a podcast outlet and Brian and I did most of the writing, and we started looking at the numbers. This was when podcasts were very, very early.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Mark started the first Lions of Liberty podcast like the same time Tom Woods started. So it's been around that long. And we looked at the numbers. We're like, well, thousands of people are listening to this podcast and hundreds of people are reading this blog. Like, why are we writing this blog?
Right.
So then I launched the podcast form of Felony Friday. And I mean, you asked about like, was I zeroed in on what I wanted to do? Not at all. Like, I thought I was just going to just talk about these stories and maybe have some guests on every once in a while, but it just kind of gained this momentum. I can't even really explain it, where I just started making connections in the criminal justice community. And it's a very tight-knit community. Everyone knows each other, people who've been to prison and helped other people get out of prison with clemency and whatnot. And there's these organizations that just have tremendous reach. And people just started recommending people for my show. You got to check out this person's story. and it just snowballed from there. And I mean, before I knew it, every Friday I was interviewing, someone else who'd been to prison for a nonviolent crime, just sharing just incredible stories. And that's how that happened. I did that for years, a long time.
When did you start? So I did a kind of a review of your show of Lions of Liberty, and going back through the catalog, it was Mark doing the podcast to begin with. So when did you start yours? As you said, you started to do yours as well. Do you know what time period you started doing yours on?
I think it's been almost 8 years. Does that make sense? So if it's 2023, that would be what, 2015, 14, 15? Yeah. I think 2015, about that. Yeah.
Interesting part. So you get connections for people. So some of the things I want to talk to you about here is actually the development of a podcast in general, right? So it's one thing to come on and interview some people and maybe do some research for it. But if you're doing criminal justice things, it seems like to me you might have to do a little bit more work than just the Larry King style where you haven't read anything at all. Did you do a lot of work for this, and how does it manifest itself for you when you find a host and then the topic? How much work do you put into the behind the scenes stuff?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's really, really good question, and I think interesting question, because at the beginning, I would do a ton of work. I would make an outline. I would have everything I knew about the case, which sometimes wasn't a lot, but I would have a lot of questions around certain topics. And I don't know, after I did that maybe 10 or 20 times, I started to realize I wasn't even looking at my notes anymore. And you kind of start to not that every story is the same, but a lot of stories have the same flow to them, the same, obviously very important parts. When you're talking about someone that's been arrested, okay, let's talk about the situation you were in. Let's talk about that arrest. Let's talk about the trial. There was a plea deal. What was the plea deal? What was working there? And it pretty much after doing it 20 or 30 times, the only thing I would do is write an intro, and then I would have just a couple questions just off to the side in case I got stuck or something to look at. But for the most part, it was just having a conversation. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes that didn't work out well. I mean, sometimes you'll get a guest that, sure, they might have a great story, but they're not good at telling the story. Right. So it's just you're just kind of pulling this out of them. But I think podcasting, it's weird. I mean, some of the people that you think maybe would be just very conversational, you don't have to have a lot of questions. It's almost better to do that. Someone like a Scott Horton, because he can get so off topic. Not that you have time to ask the questions, right? But he can get so going a million miles an hour in one direction that you need to have something to look at. How am I going to pull him back to what I want to talk about?
Let me interject on that. That is a great point. I've said often that I think Scott Horton, as an example, if you listen to his own podcast, I almost enjoy that more because he'll interject and he says some great comments in there. But sometimes some of the best interviews, and people might not like this, is actually Nick Gillespie interviewing Scott Horton, who interrupted him constantly. And doing so, it kept Scott focused. And it was a little bit different because Scott can just ramble. So a great example on that one. Back up just a tad bit. So you being a neocon, very much kind of like myself growing up too, my view of criminal justice kind of had that same thoroughfare line as well, which is, not where it is now. Did that have to change for you as well? Or with, I don't know what you were as far as criminal justice side goes.
Yeah, I think where I fell on. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and that's a good question. I got a pretty good story with that too. Good. I was just kind of reflecting on how I used to be before, and it's even hard to remember that far back. But I was raised in a household with my father being an attorney, and he's practiced almost every kind of law. He's done criminal law. He's done a lot of personal injury law. So I've heard a lot of different stories, and I was always, because hearing these stories of people being falsely accused of crimes and things like that. In one case, a teacher at the school we went to had been accused of a horrible crime, and ended up being just total fabrication, just total crap. So I had that part ingrained in me, that our system, the criminal justice system, had issues. And if you heard something salacious, don't just believe that right away. It's, to take the time to look into it. But at the same time, like, I was definitely raised in a community that was almost like a bubble, suburbia, that was insulated from. Right. Not to say that the high school I went to didn't have drugs and that in it, but the kids that got caught with drugs didn't, go to prison. Like, it was, they were they were kind of protected, right? So kind of breaking that bubble, getting outside. When I moved to after I graduated college, I started working in in a manufacturing environment, which was an eye opener, because you're working with a lot of blue collar people, which was an awesome experience. I did that first in Georgia, and then out in the Inland Empire, out in Colton, California, is where the plant was.
I know where Colton is.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah, when I lived there, I would either drive to LA for the weekend, or I had a friend that lived in Palm Springs. I would drive there for the weekend. So I spent a lot of money, and that's about it. But in my time working there, man, I was, I met a lot of people who did have, had criminal records, people that I hadn't talked to a lot of people like that in my life to that point. And like, to the extent, I've told the story a bunch of times, but like, when I first got into that job in California, I was like a management trainee, which is kind of a stupid title. It just means they just give you work they don't want you, that they don't want to do themselves. So I had the job of looking through like resumes and stuff. And it's kind of crazy to think you're going to get this kid out of college, like, oh, he knows resumes, he'll pick the right people. Right. That's the dumbest thing in the world. But they gave me these resumes to look through with very little instruction. And I was looking for like certain key things, and kind of just on my own, I took the resumes that had like, criminal stuff on it. If they had felonies or misdemeanors or stuff like that, I just took them out of the pile, figuring, we don't want to hire those people. And when I took the resumes, whatever, 10 or 12 to the plant manager, was like, hey, here's a bunch that we can, bring them in for interviews. He's looking through them. He's like, how is there nobody here with a criminal record? I'm like, oh, I got rid of those ones. I took them out. And he's like, John, like, half of the people working on the floor right now have a criminal record. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh yeah. So that was a big eye opener for me. And then getting to know those people, they're no different than you or I. They've just made in some cases made a mistake. From a libertarian standpoint, we could argue really if it was a mistake or not, but they broke the law, and they took a risk knowing that they were breaking the law. So, that was a big part of my evolution for sure, going through that.
So just kind of, you're interviewing different people about criminal justice and whatnot, and their stories. Did you ever come across someone where you're just like, I'm not quite sure, because you're somewhat skeptical on some of these things, or did you just, have you ever gone in and like not quite believed an interview of one of their stories?
Yeah, and I don't remember the guy's name, or this was a long time ago, or the story particularly well. But there was a guy I interviewed, and he was, I don't particularly like, it's fine for people to reach out and say, hey, here's my story, I'd like to talk to you about it. That's great. Like, I'll follow up from there, like if I want to do an interview. And this guy was very persistent with wanting to come on my show, and kept messaging me back. And that should have been like a red flag. Right. But I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I needed a guest really bad at the time. Who knows? In the podcasting life, sometimes that happens, right? So I end up interviewing him, and essentially what his story was, he was accused of some horrible crime. I think it was, I want to say it was a sexual crime with a minor. And I wish I remember the details of because there was also somebody who vouched for him, and I forget, somebody I knew. I forget who it was. And as he's telling this story, like, I'm asking questions. I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. And he ended up the way that he got a reduced sentence was through an Alford plea, which you know what that is. It's essentially where, if I'm remembering correctly, where you're maintaining your innocence with recognizing that with the evidence that's going to be presented, you'll probably be found guilty. I think that's basically summarizes it. So yeah, I mean, and I interviewed him and I aired it, and to this day I kind of regret it, but I don't even remember the guy's name. So to go back and find that now would be difficult.
Well, maybe we'll do that. I'll go back and search, and then we'll have. Yeah. So I mentioned that Andy and I are going to be doing this this famous guy that wrote this book about his mistreatment in the family courts, and he's kind of been lionized on the I don't know if it's the right so much, kind of, and he's the anti-Amber Heard type of story that, the Johnny Depp. So he's gets hate from that side and a lot of love from the other. And once again, I'm a family law attorney, so I'm reading the book, and I'm like, things aren't adding up. You're missing something here. And I always, when your clients come in and they tell you this story, you're like, okay, now let me read everything, and I want to, see how things go. So I searched out his stuff, and like I said, we're going to talk about it, and it's kind of similar to that, where it's almost disappointing. I don't like to see people for a cause that I would be full force and with kind of making up stuff to bolster their point, I guess. So,
that's no good.
And I guess that's kind of what this guy was doing, or was he just trying to get famous?
Well, I don't think he was trying to get famous for sure. Cause at that time, I don't know how big our reach was, but, I think, who knows? Maybe I just got a wrong vibe off of him, and maybe he was being genuine, and maybe he was truly innocent. I don't know, but it was a strange interview for sure.
So what's your long-term plan here for the podcasting? Is it still flourishing for you guys? So Lions of Liberty went under some reconstruction, I guess, some change of management, so to speak. How is that going? And do you hate Mark?
Good and no. No. So we went through some changes. So yeah, it's Brian and I now as the only the last two standing at Lions of Liberty, and Mark has his own show, the Mark Claire Show, which I mean, Brian and I fully support Mark in what he's doing. I think he just got to the point where he just wanted, and not that we would ever control each other's content or anything, or say, hey, don't do that interview or don't do this. He just wanted to do whatever, essentially just take his show in any direction he wanted to, and essentially have the full benefit of whatever happens, which is fine. And I think Brian and I mean, we were very close to just totally getting rid of Lions altogether and just going in three separate directions. But with talking with Brian, I think the two of us came to the conclusion that this is Lions of Liberty is a really strong brand that we built. Yeah. And, I think Brian and I have enough in common. We are also very, very different in a lot of ways, which I think is good, but I think we have enough in common on the core principles and agree on really how we think the best messaging for Liberty is, that it was worth continuing to team up for Lions of Liberty. And vision going forward. So, I mean, I just saw I subscribed to this newsletter called Chartable. They send you like a bunch of charts about different trends and things. And this past week, there was one in there about like the podcasting boom coming out of the pandemic. And it showed like, number of podcasts started, and in 2020, it goes way up, above the line, like millions of podcasts started. And then it came down in 2021 and even down more in 2022. I think down below even where it was in like 2019, 2018. And the same thing with like listenership. Listenership went way up and came back down. And I think that kind of makes sense. I think we kind of had like a false boom, early boom maybe for podcasting caused by the pandemic. And a lot of people started podcasts. I mean, you know how much work a podcast is, and most podcasts don't make it past like 5 episodes or something. A lot of people started podcasts and realized, I don't want to do this all the time. This is a lot of work. So I guess the story with that is, I believe podcasting is honestly it's essentially like a land grab. And media is going to continue to shift from, the larger media outlets and cable news and and all of that, and radio into podcasting. And I honestly think the major growth is yet to come. And I mean, for that reason, Brian and I, we're investing heavily right now in advertising our show on other platforms. I found in our time of podcasting, the time that you get growth in a podcast, other than like spikes here and there from big guests or getting shared by somebody with a big audience, is by really putting money back into advertising and marketing your podcast. And you'll get a big audience, and then you'll retain some of them. Then you get a big audience and you retain some of them, and you kind of slowly grow over time, because it's very, very hard to grow a podcast.
Yeah, trust me. I have started one in around 2016. It was cycling. Okay. And I kind of dumped it as the pandemic was coming in and started to do this. Part of it is, the ease, and there's some difficulties with podcasts, but there's some ease, which is there's things I want to talk about or write about. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this. And I'm like, it'd be easier if I just talked about it. So, there's some of those aspects as well. So you and Brian are combining this thing, and you're planning on growing it even more, which I'm very excited to hear, by the way. But tell me a little bit about what has changed with the podcasting from the time you started until now. Because when I was first doing it as well, I mean, the ease of like StreamYard and recording it and doing the audio is, and like I have my intro that just comes in and out, and then I just post that. I mean, it's pretty easy, although I do record, and I used to do a lot of, audio editing as well. And I don't, because I could all mix it. And as we're doing the show. So what were those old days like in comparison to now? And are you spending as much time, behind the scenes, post production?
Yeah. When we started out, when Mark started out, none of us knew anything about editing podcasts or how to do that, how to, mix audio together. None of us knew anything about it. And, so the three of us, sort of invested in Mark, what he was doing, and we paid someone to edit podcasts back then. Then when I added mine and Brian added his, well, actually when I added mine, same thing. We paid someone, we found off on one of those services in like, I don't know, Czechoslovakia or something to Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. It's probably Slovakia. Maybe it's Czech Republic. To edit the podcasts. And like, I just thought, okay, that's what we'll do. That's what I'll do forever. I'll just have, so-and-so edit the podcast. And then when you start to like change from, okay, now we want to start like making money with this podcast. We're getting a bigger listenership. It's like, and we're spending X dollars on editing. Like, how hard is it really to edit? And it's kind of funny. What ended up happening is I had an episode, one of my first ones with John Ziegler, where something happened funky with the audio, where the editor wasn't going to be able to get it done in time. She's like, this is just too much work to do this. I can't have it. I'm like, I'll do it myself. So I taught myself to edit because of that. And that was the worst mistake she made, because after I figured that out, I was like, oh, I'll just do my own editing. And from there on, I started doing my own editing. And like you said, with StreamYard, it's so easy right now. And we've moved from Libsyn to Megaphone. So if we have ads, either ads we're reading ourselves, or, if you want to insert an ad to be auto-populated in, Megaphone has that service. You just put a marker in there, and you can upload audio to it. It's so easy to do. And like, I think back to even a year ago, like having to like put these ads in and make sure in the right place and mix it all together. I'm like, that's such a waste of time, not efficient. But yeah, I used to do like so much editing too. I would edit out like every and make it sound like perfectly. And if my guest was stuttering or I was stuttering, I would clean everything up. And the only time I do that now is if like there's an audio issue or like, somebody drops off of the stream, and I'll go back and clean that up. But that's really the only editing I do anymore.
Yeah. So I assume this isn't your only job. Is it more of a hobby? Is it more of a little bit of extra income? What's kind of the process? Are you supporting your family with it?
No. So current at this point in time, I mean, we're not taking any money from Lions of Liberty, and we're putting everything back in. We could be taking money right now, but we've kind of chosen not to. During the pandemic, we definitely did take more out at that point in time. And honestly, when we stopped investing and we stopped advertising other shows, and who knows, I think a lot of factors led to it, but our numbers did drop during that time, during the pandemic. And I mean, we're definitely in a back to a slow upward trend, but yeah, it's hard to grow a podcast audience. Especially now, there's so much competition, and I find even like with the podcasts I listen to, there are, I don't know if there's any. There's maybe one or two podcasts where I listen to every single episode. There's just so much competition for the for the time.
Yeah, and so I mean, that's the interesting part about even what Mark's done about kind of rebranding. Is there anything? And I know Brian changed the name of his podcast as well. Are you doing any rebranding? Do you feel like there's something you need to change to make sure you're always kind of like keeping those there, because even though you said there's hardly anybody you listen to the full episodes of, not the podcasts I love, sometimes you miss, and then you're like, oh, maybe see what the title is. Are you doing anything to kind of keep that fresh?
Yeah, I mean, with Finding Freedom. So when I changed from Felony Friday to Finding Freedom, the main reason was the pandemic, the COVID lockdowns, everything that happened. Like, I'm here talking about the criminal justice system, and yes, it's terrible. There's all these issues, but right here is this happening in front of our face. We're not allowed to go out to eat at a restaurant. We have to wear, a mask to go on a plane, and and people are having to get vaccinated to keep their jobs. I'm like, I have to be talking about this stuff. Like I can't have a podcast every week and not talk about, these infringements on our liberty that are happening every single day. So that was the initial thing, was like, okay, I need to come up with a format where if I want to, I can still talk to, people about the criminal justice system, talk to people who've been to prison, because I do enjoy that. I do enjoy hearing those stories. I have an audience of a lot of people who like those stories. So I don't want to just push that to the side and not keep any of it, but I want to be able to talk to, people in business. At that time, it was, I want to talk to business owners who are, really navigating these turbulent times with the COVID regulations, all this stuff. And then, I want to talk to people in the health space. I want to talk to people, back then with COVID, what kinds of things are people doing, to boost immunity, things like that. And I want to talk to people in the faith space. I'm a Christian, so I want to talk to other Christians. I want to talk to, what do we see from the spiritual side of things that are happening here? And I've kind of taken that all of that forward. And that's really what Finding Freedom is. It's, looking for stories of inspiration, a lot of them coming from the criminal justice system. It's, looking at health, looking at faith, and really how you can use each of those things to really find freedom not only in your own life, but hopefully help to lead others as well.
So some great topics there that I wanted to dive into as well. So now I don't mean to harp on Mark. And by the way, I'm going to talk to him in a few weeks as well. He's famously kind of ditched the libertarian kind of idea, and, it's changing some of his thoughts there. Where are you along that lines? Is there any kind of political, the pandemic, I think, changed a lot of us maybe, but have you changed at all? Do you feel like you're still kind of there? Where are you at on all this?
That's a good question. And honestly, somebody keeps sending me messages right now. Hopefully that's not coming through.
No, do you want me to put them on?
keeps pinging.
Oh, okay. No, I don't hear it.
Yeah. That's a good question. Like if you asked me 6 months ago, I mean, what I was telling everybody was, focus on local politics. And, if that's the Libertarian Party, if that's the Republican Party, I'm good with that. But I still feel this way now, but I'm really like the whole political system the way things are built, it's so incredibly broken. And I look at the Libertarian Party, and people have talked about Dave Smith running, and I can't imagine not supporting Dave Smith if he ran for president.
Sure.
Just as a big middle finger, and because I agree with almost everything that he says. But at the same time, is it really the best thing for Dave Smith to run right now? Is it the best thing for him to run for president right now? I don't know. Is it the best thing for for the country, and really getting someone in there who could actually put their foot down and maybe stop some of this madness with the woke mind virus? But I think the biggest change for me and where I am right now is just looking at local politics, and not even politics, local culture. And I see this in the community I live in, where this this wokeism just seeps in to everything. It's slowly seeping into the schools. And my daughter goes to public school, and it's like I always have to be on alert. What's happening here, what's changing in the curriculum. And luckily in the community we're in, it's mostly conservative, but I think like a lot of places that are close to cities, it's just kind of over time becoming more and more progressive. But I'm kind of rambling all over the place, because that's where my mind really is with politics right now, especially after the midterms, where I was really taken by surprise with with how things turned out after the midterms.
Yeah.
Not that I thought there'd be I did think there'd be a red wave, but I didn't think there'd be a red wave and then everything will be fine because Republicans will be in control.
Right.
I didn't think that, but
yeah.
I definitely was surprised there wasn't a red wave. And I think the biggest takeaway I had from that was just how incredibly divided we are. Because if you look at the data of the midterm elections, essentially what happened in most places, blue got bluer and red got redder. And all that's saying is we're just getting more and more divided on these topics. And I don't really see a path forward, like a fix at the federal level that's going to make this country better. And when you start mixing in things like a central bank digital currency that is likely coming, probably sooner rather than later. And we saw what they did with the jabs. Who knows what else is coming with that? They've just kind of showed themselves for who they are. When I say they, I just mean Democrats, Republicans, elites at that highest level. They're kind of all the same to me at this point in time. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think, you said rambling or kind of off. I think I totally get that though, because that's kind of where I am as well. I mean, part of it is I found the Libertarian Party, 2016 or so. I've always had libertarian leanings, reading Bastiat and stuff before, but I really got into it then, ditched the Republicans, and I'm disgusted with the Republicans. So then you have, the party that kind of the post-libertarians that are kind of, even Mark type of people who are pushing, kind of going back to the Republicans. And I am so disenchanted with that party after having been in it all my life. It's just, I'm like, this is the whore wife that somehow I'm supposed to go back to. I mean, I just can't take myself to go there. So, but I understand what the need is. I mean, I think
that's interesting. I think that's interesting. So you're in California. So your perspective on the Republican Party, it's probably pretty similar to the way mine has become for my state, Pennsylvania. So I mean, obviously California, very blue state, but there are areas that are red. Maybe out towards where you are. I'm not probably farther to the but. Probably a lot of Republicans in California are catering. They're probably more towards the middle. I would think more centric. A lot of them, I would think, in order to win. And I mean, you look at Pennsylvania. What happened with the last election was freaking John Fetterman winning, a guy who couldn't even put a sentence together during a debate. And the Republicans in Pennsylvania put Dr. Oz up, which just a horrible candidate. And they put up an even worse candidate for governor. And that one was kind of weird because the Democrats funded him the Republican candidate for governor to get him in place. So its politics is just so crazy right now. It's a lot of it hinges on and is being influenced by this Trump, this mega factor that Trump probably, if he's being honest, has no chance of winning in 2024.
Right.
I just can't see any. Maybe if he were to run against like Kamala Harris, maybe he would win. If elections are even real, I don't know.
You're trying to get us hit off of YouTube. Thank you.
Yeah,
no,
well,
we're down that.
I was going to say the Lions of Liberty are pretty much banned on YouTube, so yeah, we're good at that.
Yeah, so people hit us up over on Odyssey and Rumble and wherever else we are too. No, great point. And so I think there's some confusion there, but I think some of the best that you can do as a libertarian is try to hold these people's feet to the fire. You talked about Dave running, and I think Dave has even said his whole goal wouldn't be to win, because that's just impossible, but it would be to, which party is going to want to get those libertarian votes. More likely you're going to, the right is going to be able to maybe glom onto some of them, and maybe you can push that party and hold them accountable. I don't know. So that seems to me on the federal level what the possibilities can be. So I don't know. I guess we don't.
Yeah, I don't know either, man. And if Dave runs, I mean, I would probably fully support him. I can't imagine not support. I listen to that's one. We were talking about podcasts. We listen to every episode. That's like one of the podcasts.
Right.
I listen to almost every single episode. But it'll be really interesting to see, because I was actually just looking earlier today. I was thinking back to previous elections. I'm like, when do they normally announce? When do presidential candidates normally announce? And it's normally like about now. Yeah. And I don't think we're getting close to. I can't picture like Ron DeSantis announcing anytime soon. The other Republican candidates, was Mike Pence going to announce soon? I don't even know who else is going to run. Nikki Haley. And on the Democrat side, what's happening there? I mean, that's an interesting story there with what's happening with Biden and the confidential documents.
Do you think that's an internal play, kind of like Governor of New York, that kind of he was killing people, they didn't want him in there anymore, and so they say, oh, you're touching girls or whatever inappropriately, and they got him out. So you think that's kind of the same thing, that it's within his own party is kind of sabotaging him?
I think it is, because I think he's being totally serious saying that he wants to run again in John Bolton.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
oh God, I hope so. I hope that's true. That would be so hilarious. What was the question again? That threw me totally off.
I don't know. We can move on from there. So look, this is our mental health. Let's talk about your physical health. So I know that you're going through this, and you're talking about your religious side of things, and I think that really helps people's mental health if they have something that's higher than them. At least I'm a religious person too, and I believe in that if you teach your kids that there's something higher than themselves, it's a very positive thing to keep them a little bit humble and to just to go through life. So, but you're also involved in physical health too, and I know that's something that you post about on Facebook and you talk about. So why don't you give us a little understanding of, first of all, is that something that you've always grown up with and you're getting back into? Is it something that's new to you? What's kind of been your physical health projection?
Yeah. So growing up, I've always, not always, when I was in high school, I played sports, played football, played basketball. I was into weightlifting. My mom was a health teacher, but she's a health teacher, and we ate decently well, considering that we were following the food pyramid back then. So a lot
Pennsylvania.
A lot of carbohydrates. But yeah, I've always at least had an interest in health. I've always had an interest in supplements, and as I've gotten older and I've started to learn more about really a lot of the pollutants that that we're ingesting. And, as in the past couple of years, the more that's come out about gut health, I think is extremely fascinating. But like my own personal story, like I kind of let my health get away. I guess that would have been the time frame really starting when I started Lions of Liberty, probably in that area. is probably when I started not taking care of my health. And it's very easy for that to happen. Especially as a man, as you start to age through your 20s, it's very easy to put on weight, and for women too. Very easy to put on weight, but I think it's like more acceptable for men, which I think is a bad thing. I think it's kind of like this thing where it's like, I have a beer belly. Why not? Why wouldn't I have a beer belly? I'm 30 years old. What's wrong with that? It's like, well, why? That doesn't make any sense. What's good about being fat? So I'm probably pissing off your audience, all the fat people you have listening.
No, I'm here for it. Mark has talked about, and the post-libertarians about, get your whatever in order. And I'm like, get your health, get your teeth. And I think those are two prime things to start with. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. So I guess long story short, I'm not going to tell my story in detail, but I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5". So I was up to almost 260 pounds, 250, 260. I didn't weigh myself every day, but I was in that neighborhood, and I was just in a situation where I had zero energy ever. I lived off coffee, felt like crap. I literally drank coffee the entire day. I worked in an office that had one of those like commercial coffee machines where you just put your cup underneath, you hit how many ounces you want, and you get coffee. So that's the only way I made it through my day. And I would still, when I would be driving home from work, I would just still feel like complete and utter garbage. And I would come home, and at that time my daughter was like 18 months old and wanting to play, and I would just lay on the couch like a slug. And that was a wake up call. I'm like, this is not normal to be feeling like this. And started taking some different supplements, started looking into, and it's not like I hadn't been kind of, even during that time, I was starting like that was back towards the beginning of like keto. And I experimented with like putting butter in my coffee and MCT oil and playing around with that. And, but I never I didn't take it all the way, or I would do it for a little while. The keto life just isn't for me. I can't stick to that. I just don't want to live a life where that's all I eat. Nothing against keto, because I think it does work for a lot of people, but just kind of figuring out. I think I went through a process of figuring out, what my own body needs, what my own body reacts to. I think that's a big part of health that is missing for people. That you'll hear people who advocate hardcore for the carnivore diet or hardcore for veganism. And I think those diets can work for specific people, especially short-term, long-term, especially vegan. I don't know if that's good for anybody, but carnivore, I think there's some people that really can get away with carnivore for whatever reason. They just don't really need any fiber, and they can just function fine. I think most people probably need fiber, because fiber is what is going to help your gut microbiome. It's going to feed those good prebiotics to feed your good gut bacteria. But to tell my whole story real quickly. So after I started focusing on my health, started working out more, my energy came back. I started running more. I was up to a point where I was running like 15, 20 miles a week during the pandemic. And I don't run that much anymore, just because I'm kind of in a place where I can maintain my weight pretty easily. And I enjoy running, but I don't really enjoy running 20 miles a week. It kind of gets old, and I'm not sure if it's good for my joints long term either. But I got to a point where I really started to understand that when we're eating things, when we're really picking what we're going to eat, thinking about what is this going to do to my body. If I'm going to have a piece of pie, sure, yes, I love pie. I'm never going to stop eating pie. But I'm going to eat, pie or ice cream every night. I'm going to look at the ingredients. I mean, that's been a huge change for me. It's just starting to look at ingredients. I try not to have anything with high fructose corn syrup in it. Sure, it's going to sneak in. You go out to eat, you're at someone's house, you're going to have it. I'm not like a freak about it like that. But if I'm like buying something for myself, or my wife's the same way, buying something for our house, we're not going to buy anything with high fructose corn syrup. We're going to try not to give that to her daughter, but same thing. If our daughter's at a friend's house or at school and she has it, we're not going to freak out. Artificial sweeteners. I think artificial sweeteners are like one of the worst things out there. And there's like a big controversy about artificial sweeteners in like the nutrition community. And there's people, good people on both sides of this argument, to quote Donald Trump. But my thing with artificial sweeteners, it's really the sweetness of it. How sweet it makes your food, I think, is the worst part about them. It makes it hyper palatable to the point where you're getting this incredible rush of sweetness that is 600 to 700 times sweeter than just regular sugar. And what happens, you get all this sweetness, like if you're drinking a Diet Coke, super sweet, but there's no calories, and your body gets that, and it gets a signal, wow, this is so sweet, this is awesome, where's all the calories? And you get no calories. So what that triggers is, I need to eat something, I need some calories, I need to eat something. So a lot of people who start drinking Diet Coke, or who consume a lot of artificial sweeteners, not everybody, because for some reason, I think some people it works for, but I think the vast majority of people they end up getting in this situation where when they're trying to lose weight, they end up gaining weight or plateauing.
So it sounds like you and your wife are on the same page for a lot of this. And that's probably really helpful. My wife and I are as well. I used to do a lot of bike racing, and I had a real bad accident about a year and a half ago, and I gained a ton of weight. So I'm back on the mend of trying to put that back. So I'm back in. My wife and I are doing some things together, and it's a motivating way. What's your kind of secret to maintaining longevity of a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that I've learned, especially recently in the past year, is the importance of lifting weights and of building up skeletal muscle. I think that really is like the key to anti-aging. That's one of the other reasons why I'm running less, because it's so important having that muscle mass. I mean, just from a logical standpoint, as you age, to be able to, lift things up, to be able to lift yourself up, right, keeping that strength, but also from, keeping a high insulin sensitivity, having more muscles, gonna make that much more easy to happen. So I think that's incredibly important. It's also incredibly important to have some sort of system. And I don't mean like you plan all your meals for the week and you eat the same thing every day, although that works for some people. Some people love that, and more power to them. But having some sort of system you can measure, either from, and you can tweak if you need to, either from, I think you need something from a supplement standpoint. You need something from a diet standpoint. Like, for example, for breakfast, I would say at least 6 days a week, I eat 3 eggs, and then I'll either have a little bit of additional protein, either not normally sausage, but today I had some sausage, but normally something like maybe a little Greek yogurt or some cottage cheese, something like that, or maybe a small protein shake. I think it's good to have at least one meal a day like that is pretty certain that you can build around. And then also at the same time, I don't write my meals down, but I think if you're coming from a place that you're trying to lose weight, that is a good first step. Just start writing down everything you eat, because it's easy to kind of just forget and to kind of just discount things. But I've kind of got to a point with my body that I mean, I can tell before I ever step on a scale, if my weight, or if I'm gaining more fat in my midsection than I'm used to, like pretty quickly. Yeah. Just by being in tune with what I'm eating. And like these past holidays, like it's crazy, like 3 or 4 days of just, and not even like going totally nuts, but just like eating a little bit more, having a slice of pie every day, having a couple beers, and just like that. I'm 39 years old. Things change really quickly. But the cool thing is, though, if you have a system, if you have something to go back to, and it's so easy to get back on track. And you can tweak that system over time. Like our bodies change over time. What they need changes over time. So having a system for your diet, having a system to stay healthy, if that's, a lot of people like playing tennis or playing pickleball. I probably would love playing pickleball. I'd love to start playing, but I don't. But my wife and I, we're just in a season right now in our life where our daughter goes to school, gets on the bus at 7:30 in the morning. We go right to the gym most days, like 4 days a week, do a workout, come back, and we both work from home. So we work. Just get a system that's easy, something you can do. And it doesn't have to be something crazy like difficult. You don't have to start by going to the gym 4 or 5 days a week. Start by going for a walk 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, I think that is huge. Or if you live in a cold climate, like I do in Pennsylvania, you don't want to go outside and go for a walk, which I'm thinking about doing this, buy one of those. And if you work from home, buy one of those like desk treadmills. Have you seen these?
Yeah.
They're
Yes.
like little tiny treadmills. And if you're in a meeting, you're on a conference call, you can walk, on a treadmill and move and not just sit there like a slug.
And I would even suggest, you talked about the food and planning your meal, or like writing down your meal. I've done a thing when I really want to start focusing of calorie counting. Now that's a little bit extreme, but you could use these apps that you add in your food, and the great thing for me on those is like, if you're going to actually do it, and on your phone, it's like a game. It's super easy. Is you start to realize every little thing you eat, is this even worth it? A muffin here. Well, these are the calories, and you could see the nutrition in there, and you could tell, is this something I really want to do? And should I have this maple bar? So anyway, and then I wouldn't say rely on that for forever, but that is one good way to start to understand the concept of everything you're eating. Do you do anything like that, or are you kind of beyond that now?
Calorie counting just never worked for me, but I think it does work for a lot of people for that reason, because a lot of people have never looked at like the label on their food. They've never really looked at, the macros. They've never looked at how much protein they're getting.
Yeah.
I would say that's mainly the only thing. Well, I look at ingredients on the label, and I look at protein, and that's all I look at. I really don't look at calories. I think I posted something on Facebook a little while ago against counting calories, and I'm not against it, especially as a way to start. I think it could be a good introduction for a lot of people to start doing that, just building that awareness. But I think as you start to learn your body and learn how it deals with different foods, you'll really start to learn that like not all calories are created equally.
Yeah.
There's some things that might have a lot of calories, but I mean your body might burn them more efficiently. There's even in the food you eat, like it's crazy with like the gut microbiome, how like if you're eating a bag of Doritos, those Doritos are feeding bacteria in your gut that is going to cause you to crave more of those Doritos. So like if you just kind of start counting calories and like, oh, I can have these few Doritos here. Not that you should never have Doritos. They're delicious. I do still eat Doritos sometimes, but you just have to be aware of that. Like same thing with eating good things, eating healthy foods, eating good protein and vegetables and fruits. Your body's going to start craving that stuff. If you're eating ice cream and sugar and crap, your body's going to start craving that stuff.
It's amazing how we will go down the rabbit hole on all kinds of things that aren't as important as taking care of ourselves. And, just what you're saying there about your gut and your microbiome, all these little things, it's like listening to my wife, what you're saying right here, because she talks to me about all this stuff all the time. And I don't always know what's going on. She just tells me what to do, but we don't always dig into this enough. And I think it's a great thing what you're at least doing, and you're kind of pushing this out there. I love to see that people are focusing on their health. One thing that happened kind of during the pandemic thing, I noticed that is I had more time to be at home, extra time to be working out. And I'm like, we're going to get as fit as possible during this time and just, be as healthy. And so in case, who knows what this thing is happening, you got COVID and it was no big deal. And I think it's helpful because we were getting a lot of vitamin D and being outside. And that was just kind of a great way to continue on. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you had like the perfect reaction to COVID. Get healthy, get out in the sun, which is not what the government wanted people to do.
No,
it wasn't. Stay inside and drink wine.
I did drink beer. I started early on. My wife's working. She's always working from home, and me as an attorney, the courts were closed, so I'm like goofing around. And I said the word vacation accidentally, and she just lit up on me. She's like, "This is not a vacation. Why don't you do something useful?" So I built a chicken coop, and while I was doing that, I drank a lot of beer, and it's caused some problems for me. So,
do you still have you still have chickens then?
Yes, we still have chickens. We have a bunch of chickens. We have a nice, pretty good sized place here. And the chicken coop is like the Taj Mahal of chicken coops. It's fantastic. We had bad storms. It makes it through it all. It's pretty fantastic. So
how long did it take you to build it?
A few weeks. It was a kit, not a kit. Let me just take I bought instructions off the internet.
I'm asking because this is with the price of eggs. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about building one myself. That's why I'm asking.
And by the way, I'll send you pictures, whatever. It's quite extensive. But it took me a few weeks to do. Building all I wasn't Mr. Handy, but it's another aspect of what you're talking about, health and taking care of yourself. What it also did was I built this thing and I'm like, I may not be able to finish cabinets that are going to look nice, but I could definitely do things. And then I started doing more stuff around the house. Next thing you know, I'm putting in new floors and all kinds of stuff in here. And it's just like, my wife does, no matter what people may think of me personally, she does like to think of me as a man. And when you go and you do these manly things, it does give you some self-confidence, and she likes it. So it's another aspect of health, mental health, and just being kind of that man of the house too. I don't know.
There's a lot to be said for working with your hands. In fact, I think Jesus said that we should mention that we should be working with our hands. So yeah.
So have you always been religious? And we'll cap it off here. But have you always been religious, or is this something that's more new?
I was raised in the Presbyterian Church, and I've always believed in God. But I think it's very new, my recognition of just the evil that is in this world, and the role that Satan plays in that evil. That was like growing up in the Presbyterian Church, like you talked about before. It was a good upbringing, learning about a higher power. I think that's really important for kids, but I didn't learn about really the other side of it until more recently. And that's been really eye-opening for me, and has been, it's helped my faith to grow tremendously as well. So
that's probably a great way to end us here. John, tell everybody where they can find you, and are they going to start seeing a bunch of Lions of Liberty ads now on other podcasts?
Yeah. In fact, you talked about Reason, and Nick Gillespie. I think our first ad ran on his show today. So if you listen to his show, you'll probably hear it there. And we'll be on a bunch of other platforms too. So when you hear the ad, you can smile knowing that it's intentional, and we put it there to grow our podcast. So when you hear the ad, you should probably go to Lions of Liberty and give us a nice 5-star rating and leave a review, because we're trying our hardest. But you can find us obviously anywhere you find podcasts. You can find us at lionsofliberty.com. We do also have solo feeds, Mark and Brian, of our shows. Mine, Finding Freedom. You can find that by searching Finding Freedom and my name, John Odermatt. It'll definitely pop up with my name. Might pop up with just Finding Freedom, but there might be a couple other Finding Freedoms. And then with Brian, his Mean Age Daydream, his feed. And the reason we do the solo feeds is because, like I said before, Brian and I do some different things. So occasionally you might want to share an episode and not share from the full feed and just from our feed, which is totally fine. So that's really the main reason that we do that. And I'm on Twitter at John Odermatt. I think that's it.
Well, great. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, you also have a Patreon, because I'm actually a member of that. So
Thank you.
Subscribe there. I sat next to Brian at the Reno convention, and now you say you're 6'5". You're the tallest member of the Lions of Liberty, right?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the tallest podcasters. I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that. I think it's Chuck from Good Morning Liberty. I don't know if you know those guys. We're actually advertising on their show as well. Okay. But I've heard he is like 6'7", so he might have me. Dave Smith, though, I'm taller than Dave Smith, but Dave Smith does have longer arms, longest arms in Liberty Movement. If you ever see him in person,
I did not know that. I did take a picture with him, and he did put it there. You know who did not though? Nick Gillespie. I took a picture with him. I kind of put my arm around, and he did the hands out. He did not want to be Me Too'd. So there we go. John, thank you
for
coming
He's
on.
probably been down that road before.
Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, this is suspect. I am supposed to have Nick on my show too. He's been DMing me for about 2 months here and nothing's happened, but we'll get on that. Anyway, John, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a long time coming, so I appreciate it. All the best of luck to Lions of Liberty. Everybody go check them out. Tune back in here on Friday. As I said, Andy and I are going to break down this book. So thanks, everybody. Take care. Oops.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. And I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast, I can't find it anywhere, and they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke, yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me,
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger.
I
just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.